Actually, my favorite part, getting to ring the bell. Oh, good morning. Welcome to Granite Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation. We extend a warm welcome to all of you here in person and all of you on Zoom. We hope you're in good health. I'm Kelsey Wilkes, and I am your worship associate today. This is the mission statement of our congregation. We are a compassionate spiritual community that celebrates diversity, nurtures the personal and spiritual growth of all ages, shares our gifts, promotes justice for all, and serves the world we live in. Please join us after the service for coffee and socializing in small groups across the hall in Davis Hall, and those on Zoom will be invited to a breakout group. If you're joining for the first time, check out our website at prescottuu.org to learn more about us. You can also see our weekly peek, the view, and Reverend Patty's videos, all of which are on the website. And if you're here in person, we will do some introductions at the end of the service. And then please stay and chat with a member or two. I want to thank our Sunday morning volunteers. Lena Huben, who's playing piano for us, Deidre Swartz back on tech, our ushers, and our greeters. Our guest speaker today is no stranger to GPU UC pulpit. The Reverend Becky Gunn lives in Prescott and is currently spending most of her waking hours as the president of the Arizona branch of the American Association of University Women. We're pleased she could give us a little bit of her time this morning. Please take a moment, put your phones on worship mode. In addition to the announcements that you have seen on the screen, I have one more, just an odd one, but I have been given 2 VIP passes to the Prescott Gem and Mineral Show, August 4th, 5th, and 6th at the Findlay Toyota Center. If you're interested in going and would like, oh, I see a hand up already. Or are you saying hi? Because I've missed you, Sandy. Both. Hi, Sandy. It's so nice to have you back and enjoy the Gem and Mineral Show. I think Sandy should get the tickets. Yes? Okay. Becky will hand them to you. Awesome. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with them when they were left over. Oh, okay. Sandra Palacios, our faith development coordinator, is across the street with our children 5 and older. As we rejoice over the refreshing, life-giving rains which have blessed our area in recent days, let us stand and sing "Love Will Guide Us," number 131 in the gray hymnal, and the words will also be on the screen. Russ is going to come help sing, not me.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard times.
Rhea, don't sit down. This morning, we join Unitarian Universalists from around the world in the tradition of lighting our chalice. Our chalice lighter this morning is Rhea Batterman. This chalice lighting, may we respect our differences, is adapted from Passover Haggah. Did I say that right? Haggah? Haggah. Haggadah. I knew she'd help me out in more ways than one. As we light this chalice, a symbol of the fire of community, may we be inspired to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to listen, to trust, to see the spark of dignity and worth in humanity, to respect our differences, and to love all creation.
Let us worship with our eyes and ears and fingertips. Let us love the world through heart and mind and body. We feed our eyes upon the mystery and the revelation in the faces of our fellow human beings. We seek to know the wistfulness of the very young and the very old, the wistfulness of people in all times of life. We seek to understand the shyness behind arrogance, the fear behind pride, the tenderness behind clumsy strength, the anguish behind cruelty. All life flows into a great common life if we will only open our eyes to our companions. Let us worship not in bowing down, not with closed eyes and stopped ears. Let us worship with the opening of all the windows of our being, with the full outstretching of our spirits. Life comes with singing and laughter, with tears and confiding, with a rising wave too great to be held in the mind and heart and body to those who have fallen in love with life. Let us worship and let us learn to love. These are the words of Kenneth Patton. Today, let us consider opening our hearts and minds to those who are different than us. Opening our heart to love, not hate.
Would you please join me in saying the words to our covenant? Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community. Thus do we covenant together. This morning, we acknowledge that there are those among us who are experiencing great joy and great sorrow. We take a moment to join our hearts with theirs in their rejoicing and their grieving. To honor your joys, concerns, or sorrows, I invite you to come forward and place a stone in our communal water bowls. May the ripples of life strengthen and comfort you. I will start by placing a stone in the bowl for Reverend Patty Willis, who has been on a month-long soul-searching pilgrimage. We wish that she has a fulfilling journey, and we welcome her back next Sunday. In honor of those joys and sorrows, let us sing together, Walking with You. As we prepare to take the offering this morning, let us embrace the feeling of connection and community and love that we have when we gather here together each week. Let us remember that this congregation and its programs are supported by your generosity. We also give back to the greater community through our Seeds of Support program. This month's recipient is the Coalition for Compassion and Justice, or CCJ. They are working hard to end homelessness in our community. You can read more about them on the screen and in the order of service. To give online, if you are on Zoom, please look for the link in the chat. Please enjoy our offertory music, Imaginary Landscapes by Lawrence Van Ruin. acknowledge the generosity of the Spirit expressed through this offering. What is given in love is received with gratitude. Blessed be. Now, Reverend Becky and I are going to read the words to one of our hymns, and we are going to read it along with Lena, and feel that these are very important words for today's service. And Lena's going to give me a lead in. Our world is one world that touches one, affects us all. The seas that wash us round about, the clouds that cover us, the rains that fall. Our world is one world. The thoughts we think of affect us all. The way we build our attitudes with love or hate, we make a bridge or a wall.
Our world is one world. Its way of wealth affects us all. The way we spend, the way we share, who are the rich or poor, who stand or fall. Our world is one world, just like a ship that bears us all, where fear and greed make many holes, but where our hearts can hear a different call. I would ask us now to move into a moment of silence, considering what touches one affects us all. We each are part of the whole, part of the interconnected universe. Just over a year ago, I fell and broke my shoulder. I screamed for help, and it was openly offered. An ambulance was called, and I was taken to the emergency room. No one asked my philosophical perspective or my political views. I was a person who needed help, and it was freely given. Imagine that. No one judged me that day for my liberal point of view. No one said, "You're old and therefore worthless." No one said, "You're not a Christian." I was a person worthy of help. There was a pretty good chance that one of the paramedics or hospital staff was right of center politically, but that didn't matter. I mattered. So back in the days when Jesus roamed the earth, there were tribal antipathies. Samaritans were considered the enemy. I mean, they were the scum of the earth. Now, I'm sure that you've heard the parable of the Good Samaritan. But today I'm going to revise it a bit based on today's world. Let's just say that I'm walking a trail, maybe around Lake Watson. No. Let's make it longer. Let's make it from Sedona to Cottonwood. The trail I'm on is relatively well used and is seldom devoid of fellow travelers. So I have my day pack on and I have some snacks and water for the hike. For some reason, a group of hikers, we'll call them a gang, decided that I had no right to be on that trail. I don't know why. Maybe it was because I was wearing a liberal t-shirt. I don't know. Anyway, they knocked me into a culvert. I hit my head and I'm groggy. I try to get out of the culvert and I can't. I yell for help as I see some hikers, and there are quite a few people who pretend that they don't hear me or see me. There are some that tells me, hey, you're gross, because I have a head wound and I'm bleeding. As evening arises, I am worried. I'm scared. People are not responding to me. Am I going to die out here on the trail in this culvert? Along comes this big dude. I mean, big dude. And he has a MAGA hat on. Well, I yell for help, but I don't have high expectations because after all, he's MAGA, right? Instead, he quickly slides down the culvert. He puts a clean rag on my head. He helps me out of the culvert. He finds me a hotel in Cottonwood. He even goes to my bank with my trashed ATM card. And he manages to get them to give me some cash so I can get home the next day. He helped me. He never told me his name. He was just a good Samaritan. He was not defined by MAGA. He was defined by his humanity. Now, this situation happens more often than we think. There are people who think or believe differently than we believe, but these people are in fact, in reality, kind and compassionate people, humans. That said, if we look at our world with judgment or hate based on cultural and philosophical differences, we lose our ability to open our hearts to those kind and compassionate people. We demonize. We put people in bubbles which we do not penetrate. We isolate ourselves from them. They become the other. We become the only ones who reject the other without knowing who they really are. Instead of assigning worth, we demonize. I sadly am susceptible to this. I find that for the past decade or so, that I am prone to judge and to frankly hate. I don't like that for myself. I also think that by perpetuating this hate, this negativity, that it harms not only me, but it also harms our community. Instead of opening ourselves up to different points of view, we diminish our humanity by losing our interconnectedness. We live in a world of difference. We know that no two of us are alike. We are different genetically, experientially, we're different religiously, philosophically. We simply have different worldviews. We each are different. Look around this room. Can you find anyone who is exactly like you, where there's no differences at all? I don't think so. I'm not being a Pollyanna here. I understand that some of our differences are extreme, that what some believe as truth, we may believe as evil, that what some want our community to be, we may not see as being viable. There is evil in the world. I acknowledge that. But we must acknowledge our first principle, the worth and dignity of all. This is the most difficult and almost impossible principle to live. People do hateful things, but underneath, we must adhere to the principle that each of us is not worthy of hate, but rather worthy of at least some respect as a human being. Some may be way out in right field on some things, but it's my belief that we have more in common with the other, with the stranger, than we have differences. That may be hard to stomach. And honestly, some days I can't and don't live up to my standard of believing in each and every person's capability to be human in the best possible way. I want to emphasize that I fall prey to hate, negativity, and sometimes let it consume me. I'm not trying to say that we can be perfect, living up to our first principle, but we should be aware that we can try to live up to that principle. So how do we deal with difference? How do we honor our differences while still maintaining our own sense of self, of our values, our commitments? How do we get along despite of, or perhaps because of, our differences? How do we promote justice, equity, and compassion when even how we define those terms are different? It is a quandary, but a necessary one if we are to remain a civil society, a compassionate and loving people. My whole premise of how we get along, how we talk to each other, how we respect each other is one of awareness, of being aware. We first and foremost need to understand who we are, what our worldview is, and what our values and views are. And then when we are confronted with an individual who has a different worldview, we can identify our reaction to their difference. For instance, we know that there are people who hold different worldviews. For instance, there are those people who believe the glass is half full. That's a simple one. And Fred, let's say it's Fred, believes it's half empty. Cliched though it may be, we often react to Fred's view negatively in predictable ways. It raises our hackles because Fred thinks differently than we do. There's nothing intrinsically wrong about Fred's worldview. I mean, some of us do think that the glass is half empty. It's his truth, it's his worldview. It just doesn't happen to be our truth. So now that we're aware that we are different and that we have built in reactivity, we, because of this awareness, can now respond differently than we might have before. How might we react? Instead of this instantaneous negative response, we might try to understand his worldview. That means we can ask questions to clarify Fred's beliefs. Then we listen. We take in what is being said. The benefit of this attempt at understanding is that we may, in fact, find that we have common ground. Even if this isn't the case, Fred may also ask you questions so that he may understand your point of view. Fred and you begin to get to know each other. And if you get to know each other, you can work together. You may not agree, but you have a bond based on at least a modicum of a relationship. The reality is that not everyone is willing to be as open as you and Fred have been. There are some people who simply won't try to understand your position for whatever reason. How do we deal with these people? I'd like to say it's easy and that there's a solution, and it isn't easy. And I have to say, I don't have a solution. But nevertheless, we must try and be understanding and not judgmental about those who are different than us. Now, when I was a ministerial intern in Albany, New York, almost 20 years ago, it's hard to believe, I was on my way to a wedding. But the only way to that wedding location was through an area of Albany that I had been warned about. It was in an area called Capitol Hill. And any of those who have been in Albany, any of you here have been in Albany? Okay. You know that it was also an area that was a century before the area where prominent families lived. And so this wedding venue was in a beautiful, restored old mansion. Well, the neighborhood in general is what one would call a blighted area. About 30% of the buildings were at least unofficially occupied. There were gangs, there was prostitution, there were drugs on the street. It was a poor Black neighborhood, and some people might have called it a ghetto. As I drove, I came to a stop sign, and all of a sudden, a group of young Black men surrounded my car. I couldn't see anything outside of the car. I was scared. But I decided that I wasn't going to do anything overt about it. I was going to wait and see what was going to happen. Well, about 60 seconds later, these young men moved away from my car. I was able to drive away, barely able to drive away because I was shaking so hard. Initially, I thought that this had something to do with my being an old white woman and that these Black men wanted to show me who had power in the hood. My view of them at this point was one based on fear and anger and my assumption that they had negative intent. Also, while in Albany, I served on the Community Accountability Board, which is a form of restorative justice. We met with first-time offenders from this same neighborhood. And I began to learn about this neighborhood's ethics and culture and values. And because of that awareness, I was able to draw an alternative conclusion about what had happened that day. I began to think that a drug deal was probably happening on the corner. These young men did not want me to see the transaction occur. Instead of being violent, they peacefully surrounded my car, allowing me not to see what was happening. And I think of this as a form of protection both for me and for them. They didn't want to hurt me, or for that matter, scare me. They wanted me to be safe. And I have to say, I'm grateful for their actions that day. After I came to know more about this neighborhood, as I began to understand more fully the culture of this neighborhood, I was able to see this situation differently. I became aware. I began to understand. Never again was I afraid to drive through the Capitol Hill neighborhood. The great Martin Luther King Jr. said, "People hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they are often separated from each other." I think of the bubble I have created in my life for purportedly safety reasons. But I admit I do not try to get to know and understand those with whom I disagree. I, on the whole, have separated myself. We need to talk to each other, open our hearts and minds to others, to find our commonalities, to find that we can agree to disagree, to find the good in people. That way, we can let go of the anger, of the fear, of the negativity, of the hate. We need to honor our differences by finding our common humanity. You might think, easily said, virtually impossible to do. Agreed, particularly now. We have created very thick-skinned bubbles. How do we burst them? A couple of years ago, I was in a memoir writing group. We had become close by sharing our life stories, and it was November 2020. And while I had never written about politics in our group, I was absolutely ecstatic that Biden was declared the winner of the election on my 73rd birthday. In our weekly session after the 7th, I wrote about my fears and my relief. And I also have to be very frank, I didn't know anything about any of the members' political perspectives. But my writing evoked sadness and anger among two in that group. They thought that I was judging them for having voted for the other candidate. I realized that I had overstepped the bounds of what they felt comfortable with and what was acceptable to them. How did I try to remedy the situation? We had a long conversation, beginning with my apologizing for not understanding their point of view. And I asked them if they would be willing to share their point of view with me. It was, in fact, a difficult and excruciating hour-long conversation. But at the end, we understood each a bit better. Today, almost 3 years later, I have a very solid friendship with one of those women. We agree to disagree, but we found that we have more in common than we knew. And that has led us to care deeply for each other. Nelson Mandela, the first president of the Republic of South Africa, an anti-apartheid activist, a political prisoner for 27 years, never sought retribution for his years in prison. He believed that we need to accept differences and learn to converse openly, kindly, and learn about what we have in common. Basically said that without conversation, civilization cannot survive. I don't have a solution to pop our bubbles, except perhaps for us to begin to be open to conversation, to asking non-judgmental questions of people we don't know or believe that are different. Be open, be aware, be kind, be loving. Don't react. And if you do react negatively, be aware of that reaction and the impact that it may well have. Today's message was created as much for myself as it was for you. I need to find a way to let go of my fear and my hate. I need to be more hopeful, less reactive, less judgmental. I need to be more of a yes person, one who sees the positive in even the darkest hours. I have to reinforce the fact that we all have the spark of divine within us, that there is good inherent in humanity. Yes, this is not easy and sometimes nearly impossible to understand, much less live. But if we are to be the best we can be, we must accept the possibility and the actuality of the best in others. Our closing hymn, number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath, is an affirmation of a life devoted to saying yes to love and to life. Please stand as you are willing and able and sing this hymn affirmatively.
yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
Thank you. I ask that you consider answering yes to life, to truth, to love. Let us honor our humanity and all of its differences, knowing that we all, in our flawed natures, are inherently worthy of respect. Believing that we all have at our foundation a good, kind, and compassionate heart. Go in peace and return again in love.
Rhea. Well, Rhea comes up. I don't normally editorialize after a sermon, but I remember as a child, I would be very nervous about who my elementary school teacher was because I heard about some of them. And my mother always said to me, your job is to come back the first day and tell me something good about them. And it always helped me to be able to survive Mrs. Anderson's class. So thank you very much. Okay. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. So I now invite those on Zoom to choose a breakout room. For those that are here in the sanctuary, are there any visitors or people we haven't seen for a while who would like to stand up and greet us?